Failure is a fact of life. You fail, I fail, we all fail. It's how we handle it that is most important. That is the topic of conversation today on Construction Genius with my guest, Erin Thorpe. She's back on the show because Erin has insights that will help you to run your company more effectively. Specifically, you're the leader of your construction company. One of your direct reports has a failure, whether that failure is because of technical skill, because of relational issues, because of personal issues. You have to know how to navigate those failures effectively. And that's what this discussion is all about. Enjoy my conversation with Erin. Take notes. It'll help you to run your company much more effectively. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Erin, welcome to Construction Genius again.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's great to be back.
Yes. I'd like to discuss today the issue of failure from the perspective of someone who is leading a construction company. They have a variety of people reporting to them. And obviously, in our lives, each one of us, we have issues and challenges and difficulties, and failures occur. And I'd like to dive into how a leader should handle failures in their company, the failure of the people who report to them in terms of their performance and just in terms of their character and their behavior. First, I'd like to ask you a question. What is the biggest mistake that leaders make when they're handling or dealing with people in their organization who have failed in some way?
I mean, I talk a lot about empathy, and I think one of the biggest mistakes is that we don't lead with empathy when someone has failed. We don't take a pause and try to understand what this might be like from that person's perspective. I genuinely believe, and it has been my experience, very few people that I have come across in my career and in my now consulting business set out to fail or set out to harm the company. What I mean by that is they don't wake up in the morning and say, how can I screw things up today? How can I really blow this apart or not show up? That's not the orientation that people are showing up to work with. They're showing up wanting to do their best, trying to bring, everything they've got to the table. And sometimes that does fall short and sometimes they fail. And there's a variety of reasons of why that can happen. It can be at the individual level, the team level, the company level. There's all kinds of reasons why that might happen. And so as leaders, when we're first presented with oh, here's the situation and this person has failed or this team has failed, if we don't take a pause and really go, how do I want to intentionally influence the outcome of this situation? And what am I actually trying to get to on the other side? We can get caught up in our own kind of default approach, which will be more fear-based, more shame-based, and, will come down kind of hard on these people without really understanding what was going on and what led to the failure. So I think curiosity, empathy, and really leaning into that tough conversation. So a little bit of courage is required to navigate these situations.
Okay, so you use the word empathy, and just so that we're clear, give me your definition of empathy.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledging and understanding someone else's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Okay.
We don't have to agree with them.
Yep.
So it's not agreement. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get caught up is they think if I engage in this conversation to understand your perspective, that I have to agree with it. And then when I don't agree with it, we start the battle, right? Between the right and wrong. And I think the first part of this whole situation, if we're dealing with a failure of any kind, is let's try to get in and understand and acknowledge what were their thoughts, what were their feelings, what was going through their head, what led them to make the decisions that they made without making it right or wrong. It's acknowledgement and understanding.
Okay. So let's assume someone's failed and you're in a place of leadership. What are some questions that you can lead with that help you to identify the root cause of the failure and begin to show that empathy that you're describing?
So I always coach my leaders around what and how questions, right? So it might look like, walk me through your decision-making process, right? What was going on? What were the circumstances? What were the pressures you were dealing with? How was the team showing up? How was the client, consultant, whatever the context of the issue is, You might even need to ask, like, what external factors were influencing this situation? And we were talking a little bit before we got on the air today, and you mentioned it even in your opening question. We're all fighting an inner battle, right? We've all got stuff going on in our lives, personally, kids, partners, finances, the world economy, our investments, our retirement, the house, all the things, right? Even just the weather. I mean, I live in a place where there were towns decimated this summer by forest fires. Like, of course, that's going to influence how people show up at work. And so you may need to understand, what are these external factors or pressures that this person's dealing with? Again, not to make them right or wrong, but just simply to understand, where was this person at? So some of those good kind of what and how questions to really start to explore the context of where they were at.
One of the toughest challenges that people have in life is admitting their failures. And because we don't like to do that, either because we're proud or we're fearful, then that keeps us from moving on from the failures or learning from them in a productive way. So let's say I'm a leader and I'm in a conversation with someone. We're talking about a particular failure that's occurred. Maybe it's on a project with a schedule issue, a client issue, a coordination issue, whatever the case may be.
All of those exist.
They do every day. And I'm getting a sense that someone is not being straightforward with me. How do I address that? How do I get people to open up?
Yeah. Obviously, like the first thing that comes to mind as you ask this question is there has to be a foundation of trust between the leader and the team member. Because I think without vulnerability-based trust, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to say, hey, I need help, or to raise their hand. I think we do that by everyday tiny little interactions between our teams. It's not something you can start. It's one of those things like you need it the most in those moments that you can't actually build it. Like you need trust as you're coming into these failure conversations. So if you haven't been working on that when times are good, so to speak, it's going to be the gap in the relationship that's going to prevent you from having the right conversation when times are not so good. So as leaders, we constantly need to be focused on what is the level of trust and how are we doing by putting deposits in the trust bank? Are we checking in with our teams? Are we showing that we care? Are we following through on our commitments? Are we showing that we're believable and dependable and really behaving in trustworthy ways, right? All the time. So like that's the first piece. But I think as leaders, if we've got this inkling, so it's kind of, I'm going to answer this question assuming that trust is there between you and a team member as a leader. You're sitting across the table from this person, you're digging in, you're asking some questions, and you've got the spidey sense that says, hey, I think there's something somebody's not telling me, or they're trying to hide something maybe because they don't want to admit that they've missed something or that they see something coming. I might ask a question like, and again, this only works if you've got trust, but I might ask a question like, what are you not telling me, or what are you afraid to tell me in this moment? You know, what do you see coming that keeps you up at night? Right? Because that's the conversation I want to have. And you might have to share something personal from your own career around a time where you saw something coming and you didn't alert somebody and it had some negative impacts on the project or the team, just to give them context to be able to say, hey, I relate and I know where you're coming from, because this is the only way I can support you, is if we're actually talking about the thing that keeps you up at night. And I've used that exact question, you know, like what is keeping you up at night? Because there's usually something.
What do leaders do to undermine the trust of the people who report to them?
I think the biggest behavior that we see, that I see and have experienced, is we say one thing and do another. So as human beings, if you say something to me around, let's just use a very hot topic right now, which is the work from home policy. It's like everybody's talking about it, right? And we got companies clawing people back and we got people leaving because they want flexibility. So if you as a company say, we do not have a work from home policy, everyone needs to be in the office.
Yep.
Okay. And if you have to take a sick day, if you've got a kid's home at sick, or if you've got a doctor's appointment, like it's a PTO or it's a sick day, right? Like this is the policy.
Yeah.
It's in black and white. We've signed it. We've circulated it. We've taught on it. And then as a leader, I get a kid that's homesick one day and I choose to work from home.
Yeah.
Right there, my team is like, what in the actual is happening here? Because you just told me that I can't do that, but now you're doing it.
Right.
So why do the rules not apply to you? Right. Like that's a very simple, and I deal with this all the time right now, because as executives, and one of the things that I experienced in my career and I see, you know, as we rise through the ranks in a company, there's more trust in our ability to deliver. So we get this unspoken amount of flexibility. We can go to a doctor's appointment. We can work from home if we need to. We can take a call from our car. No one's watching our desk going, were you there from 8:30 to 4:30 today? But we do that of the front line. We time watch, we time clock. So the policy either needs to be written in a way that you incrementally, gradually grant more flexibility, or we have to enforce. We have to do what we say we're going to do. And that's just one situation. But the underlying premise is that as leaders, if we're not doing what we say we're going to do, trust is broken.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the sort of the hidden challenges that someone has when they get into a place of leadership is this sense that somehow gives me permission for a wider latitude of behavior that I wouldn't have if I wasn't in that role of leadership.
Exactly.
And again, what that does, it's often unsaid, but it does undermine our credibility. Even if others don't necessarily notice, it actually undermines your own integrity and you know it in yourself.
It's so true. So that would be the number one thing that I see leaders doing. The second thing that I see leaders doing that undermines trust, and especially in our industry of construction, engineering, like technical, predominantly, historically masculine industries, is this element of caring. So really just demonstrating that, hey, I care about you as a human being. And I'm not talking about, we don't need to lay on the couch and have a therapy session, but did you even ask how my weekend was? Did you stop to say, hey, how are the kids? Did the soccer tournament go okay? Whatever. Did you go to the football game on the weekend? Just some form of demonstration that I care about you as a human being.
Right.
And we tend to just jump right to the business. And that research has proven that actually, this demonstration of caring and connecting at a human level is a huge component of trust.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so two things there, saying one thing and doing another, and then intentionally having that human connection with people.
Yeah.
Okay, so two things we do, right, when we failed is we cover it up or we shift blame.
Yes.
Right? So it's not my fault, it's their fault. And in construction, that can often be very challenging because construction is complex and it involves a lot of people. So I could be talking to my project manager and say, why is this project going south? And he says to me, well, dude, go talk to the superintendent. They're the ones screwing it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So what does a leader do in that situation?
So I think as leaders, recognizing that behavior to cover it up or to shift blame is the individual's way of protecting themselves, right? The human brain is designed to keep the individual safe. That's its primary function, not thriving, surviving.
Yeah.
So that behavior of cover it up and hide or shift blame and deflect is the brain's way of protecting that individual and trying to keep that individual safe.
Yeah.
So as leaders, if we see that behavior, the first thing to do before you keep going on the issue is to say, hey, project manager, your job isn't at risk. You are safe. I want to understand what's really happening here so we can all support each other to get through the other side and get the outcome that we want. So what's really going on? I don't want you to blame someone else. You don't need to hide and protect. You're okay. Let's have the real conversation. What do we see happening? Where do we see opportunities to improve, deflect? What are you struggling with? What's keeping you up at night? And let's have that conversation, right? Because as leaders, if you can start to see that behavior, then you know that team member's already not feeling safe. And if they're not feeling safe, they're going to continue down that path of hide and hope for the best, which may not work out. Or they're going to continue to shift blame, which is just going to create wedges and divides in the team. And then the team can't function and they will not achieve their outcomes,
Okay, so what just popped into my mind when you were talking there is a scene from The Godfather. And the scene is where Michael has just finished killing all the other heads of the families. And he's talking to Carlo, his brother-in-law. And, he's telling Carlo, just tell me the truth.
You're safe.
Yeah, what actually happened? You're safe. And, Carlo goes, yeah, I did betray you, and then 5 minutes later, Carlo's dead. Yeah. All right. So, and the reason I bring that up is because I think this is one of the major issues that happens when failure occurs. There's this uncertainty on the part of the person the subordinate person or the report person. What is my leader thinking? What is the situation here? And sometimes I think what happens is that when a failure is being addressed, maybe the leader goes in and they're not quite sure what's happened. And so they don't really know what the outcome is going to be. But then having that statement, your job is not at risk or something like that. How should a leader go into a conversation to be able to open it up with a person right from the start so that what's at stake is clearly defined?
Yeah. And you're right. This goes back to doing what we say we're going to do. If we say you're safe, we can't turn around and then fire you. And we can't have a history of saying, everyone's safe, we're a family, this is great. But then we turn around 2 weeks later and go mass layoffs and get rid of people. And so that statement, we have psychological safety here, and whatever that is, only works if you have been consistent in your word and your action.
Right.
Like that's the thing leaders need to pay attention to, because their actions are actually speaking louder than their words. And that's what the team members are paying attention to. Right. So if you have a history as a leader of losing your marbles and blowing a temper stack and firing people on the spot, your team will not tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
They're going to hide and protect as long as they can, because they know, or they can anticipate how you're going to behave.
Yes.
So it comes back to, as leaders, you really got to pay attention to your behavior and what is that telling your team?
Okay.
And if there is something at stake, if it's like, hey, this project is going sideways, we're losing too much money. If we can't turn this around, then we're probably going to have to look at making a personnel change. As leaders, we have to be willing to lay that on the table so people know what they're dealing with.
At what point do we state the what's at stake as a leader? So I'm having this conversation, there's been an issue, there's been a failure. Do I go right in and say, your job's not at stake, just to open up the playing field, so to speak? How do I handle that?
My kind of orientation is I will give like one, maybe two kind of chances. If we're having the same conversation 3 times in a row, then we're probably having a different conversation around like your behavior is not changing. So wrong seat on the bus, or maybe even the wrong bus, right? But the first conversation, and I encourage leaders to operate from this place of assume positive intent until you've been proven otherwise, right? So again, first offense, if you will, or first sign of failure, tell me what's going on. Let's explore what's happening. Give me the whole goods so I can see where I might be able to support you. Let's figure that out. And then you're going to have some actions come out of that meeting. We're going to have different conversations. We're going to learn some skills, whatever that might look like. If in a few weeks or months, depending on the timeline, or days, we're seeing the same behavior from that person, we're going to have one more really frank conversation about the change that's required. And then you're either changing or you're going to be changed.
And you're making that clear in the conversation.
You are right up front, because people need to know where they stand. And I think it's really okay to say, I think this is the other thing leaders need to be aware of. Are you saying that this person is bad, or are you saying their behavior isn't at the expected level? Because if I go into a conversation and I say, you're terrible at this job, you can't do it, that's going to be really hard for that person to like get on board with the change that I need.
Okay.
But if I go into the conversation, do the exploring, understand the perspective, and then say, okay, I can see all the forces at play here, and your behavior, the things you say and do, is not at the expected level yet. I expect that you're calling that trade the minute there's a sign of them not showing up. I'm expecting that you're putting people on notice when they need to be put on notice. I'm expecting that you're communicating with the owner about changes, like within 5 days or whatever the contractual arrangement is. These are the level of expected behaviors that I'm looking for. And here's your chance to rise. And then you watch. Is the behavior changing? Because people will tell you very quickly through their behavior whether they're on board with that or not.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think of failure in terms of root causes, right? And often there's this presenting problem, or there's this apparent issue, but it's being driven by something deeper.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So I think in terms of perhaps it's a positional fit or an issue of competency. Perhaps I've taken a very good project manager, promoted them to project executive, and they're comfortable building a project, but they're just not comfortable leading a team of people.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next one would be a team fit. So let's say in my executive team, and this happens many times, I have 2 people who are technically competent and also have strong relationships with people who report to them, but they don't have a strong interpersonal relationship. There's a lack of a fit there. Then there's a cultural fit. So let's say this person is technically competent for the position that they're in, but they're not a cultural fit for the organization. So I'll give you an example. I have one of my clients, the purpose of their business is to crush the competition. That's their culture, right? I mean, they're going to show up every day. And what that means practically, if you're a PM, you're going to show up at 6 and you're going to leave at 5. So you're going to put in your 11 hours every day. And that's just the expectation.
Yeah.
Right. And then the fourth one is, I'm going to call it personal/moral failure. In other words, failure that is perhaps outside of the business, but is impacting the business.
Yeah.
Now, as a leader, when something is not working, when a project isn't profitable, when there's issues in my business, it can be a combination of all those kinds of things.
Yep.
How do I begin to tease out the root cause of the issue so that I can be more effective in trying to solve it?
Yeah.
I think that was the longest question I've ever asked.
And there's a lot of parts to it. So I think we'll just kind of hit one-on-one. So I think the starting place for a leader is really to go through that checklist that you've just laid out, right? Does this person have the skills, and have we supported them in building the competencies to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive in the role that we have given them? Yeah. So if we've recently promoted an individual contributor into project manager or a project manager into project executive, very different skill set, right? And we do this all the time in our industry, where we take the best individual performer and we go, great, you're doing a good job. Go lead this multi-million-dollar project and this team. And they have no interpersonal skills. They don't know how to build trust. They don't know how to have tough conversations. They don't like dealing with emotion. The people are messy, and they put their heads down and they focus on spreadsheets and schedules, and the team falls apart, right? So checklist item number one as a leader, if I'm trying to diagnose this situation, and that's really what I would call it, is like a diagnosis. Yep. Did we support this person in developing the competencies that are required for this new job, not just relying on their old competencies, which made them successful in the old job? Yeah. I think the team fit, we got to look at that, especially after COVID. I think that it was really interesting because business people still managed to keep companies open and get projects done during COVID, but it came at a great expense of the team dynamic and people's personal, like mental health, sometimes their physical health, because we were in front of these computer screens all day long. Yeah. And so I think there needs to be this real focus on what are we doing to support the team to come together as well. So are we checking for fit? Are we doing things and promoting things and supporting relationship building outside of just sending emails and having Teams chats? What are we doing to promote the relationship building? Culture is a really interesting one because it's been my experience in my career. The companies that I've worked for that had very strong cultures and defined ways of being, people who didn't fit that culture took themselves out. They self-selected very quickly. And the people that loved it kind of were like lifers, like we drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah. So I think the stronger your culture is, and like, you know, your client example of crush the competition is great. Like they are clear in what that expectation is. So you will get the ultra competitives, you will get the people that are fine to put in their 11, 12 hours a day. But the people that just want to work 6.5 hours a day are not going to survive, and they're going to self-select out. Right. So that then begs the question that if I think it's a cultural fit, maybe it's an issue of me not strongly defining the culture or standing for the culture that I want. Yes. And I've also worked for companies that have very loose or weak defined cultures, right? Yeah. Where we tolerate this wide spectrum of behaviors. So again, a lot of people fit, but they may not fit team to team, because without a strong company culture, you're going to end up with these micro cultures inside each team. So if I'm working for you and it's going great, and then I get promoted out of your team into a different team, but that team has a totally different culture, I could be perceived to be not a fit. But it's not, would be a team kind of culture piece, not necessarily a company culture, because we may not have a strong enough company culture. And then often the personal kind of moral piece that you were talking about at the end, so like what's going on in our personal lives, this is the piece I see a lot of leaders steer away from. There's still this belief in our industry that we're one person at home and one person at work. Yeah. And it's not been my experience. Like I am one person, and whatever's going on at home is affecting how I show up at work. And the reverse is true. If I'm on a super tight deadline, I mean, there have been days that I have slept in job site trailers and not come home to my family because of what's going on at work, a late pour, an early turnover, a whatever. And so it's like, the work impacts my family and my family impacts the work. And so as leaders, if you aren't willing to dive into this and to really explore like what outside of these four walls is impacting your ability to show up here and how can we support you through that, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And again, it just makes people hide more, right?
Hey, hope you're enjoying my interview with Erin. Just a quick break to remind you to go out to Amazon and purchase my book, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS. Leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. I encourage you to go out and read the reviews on Amazon and really dive into why people have found the book to be super helpful. And then after reading those reviews, purchase a copy for yourself. And if you have a large leadership team, purchase 10 or more copies for your leaders, and then contact me directly, because I will come via Zoom into your company with those leaders and conduct a question and answer session around the book and also provide you some bonus leadership training. I would normally charge $2,500 for an hour of my time to do this. All you need to do is purchase 10 copies of the book, which is about $200 on Amazon if you get the paperback. And that's a killer deal. And it's also a way for you to really lock in the learning from the book. So go out to Amazon right now, purchase 10 or more copies, shoot me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, with the receipt of your purchase, and we'll set up that Zoom meeting with you, me, and your leadership team. All killer, no filler. And now back to my interview with Erin. I want to talk about the personal thing because I've seen this in a number of different situations. I know in my own life, I can remember working at a company many years ago when I was going through some personal issues, and the owner of the company showed incredible support to me.
Yeah.
And I reflect on that, and I think some of that support was based on our personal relationship. It also was based on the fact that he knew that I was a good performer, but my performance had been dipping because of my personal issues. I can think of another example where there was someone dealing with personal issues in their lives, and I was looking at it from the outside, and I would have fired the guy, but that is not what happened. And the loyalty that the company showed to this individual was rewarded.
Yeah.
And so as an owner, this is one of the issues, right? So I've got someone with personal issues and I understand that, but when do I begin to draw the line? How do I determine when, you know what, hold on a second. We've tried, it's not working. It's time to move on.
Yeah. And again, I kind of go back to those, like the couple conversations, like we need to put at what's at stake. And I think you can have the conversation of like, help me understand what's going on in your world. And this is what we've got to do from a business perspective. So how can we marry the two, right? What pieces are you able to tackle? Where do we need to add support? Or are you even able to engage in this right now? You know, sometimes people are going through such huge health crises or massive changes in personal relationships or a kid's medical diagnosis or whatever it is, you know, an aging parent. Like there's so much stuff that we're dealing with. You may need to go part-time. But I think I've had a number of these little moments in my career as well. And my automatic assumption as the employee is that my only choice is to work full time at 80 hours a week or quit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? That's my employee perspective is like, if I can't give it my all, then I need to quit my job. So I hang on because I've got all these demands going on. I've got kids to raise and bills to pay. Quitting is not an option, right? So I try to hang on to this full-time position. I know I'm failing. They can see I'm failing. I'm a mess. I'm doing my best to put on the brave face every day and show up at work. And I've had leaders that have noticed that and have come to me and been like, there are other options, Erin. Like, help me understand what you're dealing with as much as you're willing to disclose. And I will let you know where we can meet you in that.
Yes.
So I think that's the leader's job is just like, I don't think as employees, especially in this industry, because there's so few examples of anything other than full-time or nothing.
Yeah.
The employees aren't even thinking that modifications are an option.
Right.
Right. So as a business owner, if you can job share, if you can give them part-time work, if you can move them into a different part of the organization, if you can reduce, maybe you take them off the $50 million project and you give them a couple $500,000 projects, like they may not even know that these options are available. And I think that's the first conversation to explore, right? I went in one time ready to quit my job because I just couldn't deal with the demands of the personal life that was happening. Yeah. And my leader said, why don't you just take a 6-month leave of absence, Erin? You don't need to quit. We'll give you 6 months. You go figure out life and your job will be here when you come back. Never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Right. But it allowed them to put somebody that could perform in my job. They knew I was a good performer. And again, you talk about that conversation created this loyalty bond between me and my leader in that organization. I would still go back, you know, like if they called me tomorrow and said, hey, we've got this thing, I would seriously consider it because that created so much trust and loyalty.
I want to flip it a little bit, and I want to think from the point of view of the person who's failed.
Okay.
And let's say I'm in a company and the results of the division or the project that I'm responsible for haven't been up to par, and I begin to feel the ground shifting underneath my feet.
Love that.
perhaps the way that I walk into the executive meeting now, and the president who used to smile and say hi is a little more reserved. I'm not sure where I stand. And obviously, if I'm working in a company, let's say I'm not going to go start my own gig or anything like that, I want to have some understanding of where my career is going. How should I talk to the people I report to when I begin to see the ground shifting underneath me?
I am a huge believer in personal responsibility. And what I mean by that, just like the leader's going to go through this checklist of, are they competent? Is there a fit? What's going on in the personal life? I think as individuals, we also need to do that same diagnosis. Do I have the skills for this? Is there a gap? Where might I need support that I haven't been asking for? Where might I need to build a relationship that I haven't been putting effort into? Because most of us, again, our brain is going to want to keep us surviving. It's going to shy away from the conversation that we need to have.
Yeah.
So if I start to feel that, and because I already know I'm not delivering, I already know that. I'm trying to hide it because my brain is trying to keep me safe, right? Yep. My brain is going, just hold on a little bit longer. You'll get through this. It'll be okay.
Right.
Nobody needs to know, right? Like I can remember those moments and that conversation and that self-talk that's like, just grin and bear it. You'll get through this. It'll be okay. Somehow, some way, this will work out. So when we notice ourselves in those moments, that's the invitation to do this little self-reflection and to go, you know what? I actually might need some skill building in difficult conversations, or I might need some skill building in negotiations because I'm getting walked all over in these buyout processes. You know, I might need some executive support to come in with this one particularly difficult trade that seems to be just running roughshod over the project. And I think that's where those conversations, if you're willing to put your hand up and to sort of say, hey, I can see the writing on the wall. I'm feeling uneasy, uncertain. Here's what's going on. This is my assessment of it. What do you see? That's a trust building conversation right there.
Right. Yeah.
And now the executive doesn't have to wonder, are they going to pull it together? Are they going to fix this? Where is this going to go? Right? Now you've invited them to be a part of the solution. And now you're in it together.
Yep. How do I process failure if I've never experienced it before? What I mean by that is, let's say I started off as a project engineer out of school, got promoted in a few years to project manager. Now I'm project executive. And then all of a sudden, either I've reached my ceiling of competency or something happens in the business and I actually experience failure. How do I process that?
Yeah, fortunately, those mental muscles, those networks in our brain to be able to process failure are no different than our physical muscles. If we've never used them before, they're going to be very atrophied and very weak.
Yes.
And so you might need a coach, you might need some third-party support, you know, whether that's a psychologist or a therapist or something like that. But the biggest shift, like the first step, is in recognizing that there is an opportunity to build some capacity.
Okay.
Right. And so you can look at failure as like, I failed. This is the end. It's over.
Yep.
Fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Or you can look at failure as like, okay, I've reached my ceiling in this arena. If I want to get to that next level, this is an opportunity for me to grow and build some resilience and build some muscles.
Yes.
Right. So if we're the leaders of the construction company and we've noticed that, okay, Joe's been here for 25 years, just experienced his first failure. We're going to need to support Joe through that because Joe's a good guy, right? Just kind of reached, but he wants to keep going. So we're going to get him some support, whether that's a coach, third party, maybe some training, whatever that looks like. If you're the individual, you really get to make a choice. Do you want to stay stuck and look at failure as like, this is as far as I can go, which is that fixed mindset? Or here's my opportunity to build some new skill. Let's see what I can learn out of this process. Growth mindset. Right. Up to the individual as to how they want to approach that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's such a two-way street, right? Because I can hear the individual who's failed saying, easy for you guys to say, but you don't know what my boss is like.
Yeah.
And, you know, the boss saying, that would be great if everyone had that fixed mindset, but somehow these people who report to me, sometimes they just don't tell me the truth. They're just not open and transparent. And so it's interesting. I think if you go into life understanding that human beings are not perfect, then that can really help you then to process through. And by the way, when I say human beings are not perfect, I mean you as well as everybody else.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're all perfectly imperfect, if you will. And I've really come to understand that like our perfectionism is actually part of our armor to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And so people who haven't failed in their life often keep themselves in arenas that they know they can perform.
Yeah.
As part of their way of keeping themselves safe. And so as leaders, when we're looking to promote people into new and different arenas, we need to be having this failure conversation with them. Like, failure is a part of learning.
Okay, so that's interesting, right? Let's talk about that. And I think this is a really good capper on the conversation. Because again, failure often happens when someone gets promoted, something, maybe a new project type comes in or something like that. How do I set the stage as a leader for helping my people to deal with failure and process it in a healthy way?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me. I go back to raising these little children and now that are teenagers.
Yep.
When our kids are first learning to walk, how many times do they take 2 wobbly steps and fall and get back up? And, they don't fail 50 times and go, well, I'm just going to be one of those kids that don't walk. You know, to keep trying. Riding a bike without training wheels on it. Like, there's so much growth that happens in our children. And sometime around the time we push them out of the nest and they start to go into the workforce, I think that's when I'm starting to see this mindset shift of, now I have to have all my ducks in a row. I have to have my, together, so to speak. And I have to be quote unquote competent. And I'm not allowed to fail anymore because I'm supposed to be an adult.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, hey, we're promoting you into this position. We fully expect that you will come across situations you have never faced before.
Right.
If you try to do them on your own, the likelihood of you failing is high.
Yeah.
If you come to us and say, hey, I've never done this before. What do you suggest? Here's what I'm thinking. The likelihood of failure is probably going to drop a little bit. We still might have a few bumps in the road, but we fully expect that this first project in this new role or this first 6 months, you're going to have a lot of learning and growth. And there's going to be a lot of failures. Hopefully none of them are catastrophic, but each and every one of them are going to teach you something that you need to learn as part of this new role.
Yeah.
So you just set the expectation that we expected. And I've had this conversation, Eric, and it's funny because people will be like, oh, no, I've got this. I totally know how to do this. Failure doesn't apply to me. I'm good. And then 3 months later, they're back in my office and they're like, oh my gosh, you were right. I've never done this. That went horribly. How do I fix this? So yeah, for the people that want to grow and want to do more and are looking to move in their careers, failure is a natural part of that.
Let me just ask you this last question. Many times the failures that we see in ourselves, when we see them in others, we can either respond with sympathy or with judgmentalism. And it's interesting because, the thing that gets us the most angry about what other people do is exactly what we do.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
How do I become conscious of that as a leader? How do I keep that at the top of my mind when I'm working with people who are perhaps in new roles or going through challenges so that I'm able to show that empathy that you talked about at the beginning of the episode?
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said. It's being self-aware of our own self-judgment. So what I often have clients that I'm working with do is write a list of where they judge themselves the harshest. What bars or measures or exacting standards do they hold themselves to that if they don't measure up, they're beating themselves up on? Because those are the areas that you're going to be the harshest with in your team. So for instance, one of my biggest weaknesses and an area that I don't hold myself to an exacting standard is in around detail orientations. I will often have a spelling mistake in a slide or missing a period in a report, that kind of thing. I don't hold myself to that exacting standard. So when other people point it out to me, I'm like, thank God you found it. Right. I'm just like, whoo, you saved me there.
Yeah.
But being on time and showing up early and being prepared is an area that I hold myself to an exacting standard. So if somebody isn't on the call 2 minutes before they're supposed to be on the call, I already think they're late.
Yeah.
I'm like, where in the heck are you? Why are you being disrespectful? And I got to watch that because I'm like, not everybody thinks 5 minutes early is on time.
Right.
So it's just, again, become aware of where you judge yourself and have these exacting standards for yourself, because that's what's going to play out in your relationships.
Yeah. It's really interesting. We're having a conversation here, and I think it's obviously something that you have to process through and you have to get lots of practice.
You do.
And it's a deep challenge, right? Because again, we're dealing with human beings. And I think the more aware you are of your own weaknesses and the more perhaps you've been shown grace in your own life, you can then show that to others. But that's not always guaranteed, is it?
It's not. And it is exactly what you said. It's a practice. It's a practice in shifting our thought process. And it can start with little tiny things like the person in front of you this morning in the coffee lineup was a bit indecisive and you got short-tempered with them. Did I need to react in that way? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I could have chosen to do this. Take a deep breath, realize it was okay. Maybe they're dealing with something else. It's in those small little moments that we choose to do this practice of noticing our response, our reaction or our response, right?
Yeah.
The reaction is when we're on our automatic kind of default thinking. And our response is when we actually get to choose how we want to behave in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's really the practice. And the leaders and the individuals that are practicing pausing and responding are likely having better relationships, better outcomes, because they are actually choosing how they want to impact people and their circumstances. Those out there that continue to just react to situations are not able to influence in the same way.
All right. So let's just summarize here. Erin, give us 1 or 2 or 3 bullet points that we can walk away with to help us to improve at working with our people as they're going through failure.
I think first and foremost, it's normalizing failure. It's a part of the learning process. So if any part of your team or organization is going through growth, failure is going to be a part of that. And so you got to talk about it. I mean, as adults, we got to hear it 10 times, 10 different ways before it really starts to sink in. So you got to talk about it and demonstrate it and share it and show it all the time as a leader. I think you got to recognize that when people do fail, there is an emotional component that you are going to have to allow them to express. If you don't allow them to express it, it's likely going to fester and could negatively impact their ability to stay and grow. Whereas if you just allow the expression, you may not even have to do anything with it. It's going to allow it to move through them. And now they can get to the other side. And I think that's the thing that as leaders, we need to stop being afraid of the emotion. It doesn't mean people are broken. It doesn't mean they're incapable of performing. It means they're a human being having a human experience, because we all have emotions.
Right.
Right. And their expression of that might look different than your expression, but it doesn't make it any less valid.
Excellent. Erin, tell us more about your work, who you work with, and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. So I work with teams and leaders, specifically developing empathy skills, predominantly around having difficult conversations, building trust. We talked a lot about that today, and really just helping teams and individuals develop into high performance teams and self-reliant achievers. And I do that through group settings and one-on-one coaching and training. And the best place to start is probably my website. So www.erinthorpe.ca. I'm sure all this will be in the show notes as well, or connect with me on LinkedIn. That would be an easy place too.
Everything's going to be in the show notes. Erin, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for joining us here again.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
On Construction Genius. Thank you for listening to my interview with Erin today. And I hope this will help you to be more effective at handling failure in the lives of the people who report to you, being a little more empathetic and working through those issues. Feel free to visit Erin's website to learn more about her, and feel free to share this interview with other people who you think would benefit. One last final request, by the way. Go out to wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be on Spotify, Apple, wherever you give us a review and a rating. So if you think we've earned a 5-star review, give us that 5-star review. The reason why is because it helps us to be seen across the internet and gets more people the opportunity to listen to these killer interviews. Thank you so much for listening to Construction Genius today. We'll catch you on the next episode.